then also be the first speaker. We're very pleased to be here today at SIPA. The event is sponsored by and hosted by the Center on Global Economic Governance at SIPA, which is headed by Professor Jan Svenar. Needs no introduction, I think, for this audience. We also have sponsorship from the Worldview Global Culture Alliance and from the Entrepreneurship and Policy Initiative here at SIPA. I'd like to give the floor for just a minute to Jasmine Wang, who's the co-founder and executive director of WGCA, to tell you just a bit about WGCA.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jasmine Wang from Worldview Global Culture Alliance, WGCA. I'm one of the co-founder and also co-chair. We're NGO founded last year, 2017, beginning of 2017, and
Microphone.
Oh, okay. Our mission is to promote engagement and dialogue about sustainability and economics justice. So we actually very much pleasure to co-host this wonderful event. And we already done a few events in other universities such as Harvard, MIT, Fordham, and also UN. Today, if you're interested in our work, please, afterwards, you can come to talk to us. Thank you.
Okay, I'll keep shouting. Let me introduce the speakers, and since I'm the first speaker, I'll introduce myself. I spent most of my professional life in this building. I was the Associate Dean of SIPA, Director of the Master of International Affairs program, and the founding director of the Global Public Policy Network, which is meeting upstairs today. Since 2007, I've been based in all at one time in New York, in Beijing, and in Moscow. I taught at Beijing Normal University for some years, currently teaching at the Russian Academy of National Economy and Public Administration, and also involved in a number of social enterprise and education projects in China, in Thailand, and here in the US. Our second speaker is Professor Ronaldo Lemos, who is a visiting professor here at SIPA. He is a founding director of the Institute for Technology and Society of Rio de Janeiro. He has law degrees from the University of Sao Paulo and Harvard, and is one of the creators of the Marco Civil, which is a law enacted in 2014 in Brazil that protects online rights, privacy, and net neutrality. And our third speaker is Professor Liangang from China, but also of New York now. And Professor Sun is a very distinguished and well-known Chinese artist who also is a founder of one of the great art colonies in Beijing, and now based here is a futurist working on artificial intelligence and other issues related to our shared human future. He's also has an appointment as a professor at Beida, or Peking University as it's known. So these are our three speakers, and I'm going to begin. I'm going to speak very broadly about artificial intelligence and its implications for governance and public policy. I'll be followed by Professor Lemos, who's going to focus, I think, a bit more on issues of rights and privacy and equity. And then Professor Sun is going to take us on what I would call a thought journey of, as he calls it, the transition from life 2.0 to life 3.0, which involves the transition to a life guided by algorithms. The topic of artificial intelligence is a thorny one. It's a difficult one. It's deeply complex. And you should initially or immediately mistrust anyone who tells you that they're an expert on this. So that's not a claim I make. It's not a claim that I think any of us would make. There's very little consensus on the meaning and the significance. There's a lot of verbiage, a lot of hype about the potential and the perils as well of artificial intelligence. For definitional purposes, I'm just going to say that I am using the term artificial intelligence very broadly as a kind of placeholder for or a proxy for a complex of technologies, new technologies, ranging from cognitive assistance to machine learning to robots, drones, mobile sensors, self-driving vehicles, virtual reality, 3D printing, and blockchain, and some that I'm not even mentioning. This is not a productive moment to try and go into definitions of all those things, but I just wanted to alert you to that. And I want to begin by saying that since the beginning of the industrial age, human beings have been obsessed with the idea of machines and what machines can do and what machines might do. And I think it's very significant that we're meeting here in 2018, because 2018 is in fact the bicentennial of a very seminal work about this. And that work, which you all know, is a novel called Frankenstein by Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley. This is the 200th year of its publication. And there is, in fact, something called the Frankenstein Bicentennial Project, which is partially funded by the National Science Foundation. It's based at Arizona State University. A new edition of the book is coming, has been published by the MIT Press. And this is the first of a number of imaginative works that have really shaped human attitudes toward machines and the role and the interplay between machines and human beings. As you know, Frankenstein is a cautionary tale of a scientific experiment gone terribly wrong. And the new edition of Frankenstein quotes the scientist J. Robert Oppenheimer, one of the godfathers of the atomic bomb, who said, "Scientists' responsibility must be engaged before their creations are unleashed." And that's really a moment, that's a good warning to us all at this moment. There's a long tradition of imaginative works about machines and people that have shaped our views. And I always really like to remind people that life imitates art, not the other way around. If you move on from Frankenstein, you have Jack London's 1908 novel, The Iron Heel. In 1921, a play that was produced in Prague by a writer named Karel Čapek called RUR, and he's the man who invented the word robot. It didn't exist until 1921. After that, Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, George Orwell's 1984, Stanislav Lem's Solaris, movies like The Terminator and Blade Runner, and up until the present day, I would also recommend Gary Steingart's wonderful novel, which is called Super Sad True Love Story, which is about the not too distant future in New York in a society where people don't read books anymore and live by machines. So all of these embodying human dreams, dreams of machines making life better by taking over and performing labor functions of human beings, and human fears, fears of machines taking over, of usurping human initiative. So what I think we need at this moment, more than ever, is what I would call a global dialogue on artificial intelligence, its potential, and its perils. These technologies are here to stay. They will grow in importance. They already occupy center stage in a lot of discussions in the public realm. And we must all be part of assessing the pros and cons as individuals, as communities, as societies, and as governments. And I think we're at a moment especially in which policymakers need to be more deeply engaged in this dialogue. In some places they are, in a lot of places, including in this country, they're largely not engaged at present. But there's one more difficulty, and that is, as Andrew Moore from Carnegie Mellon, who is one of the experts on artificial intelligence, put it, Andrew Moore said, "We don't know what we don't know." We're at a moment in the early development of artificial intelligence and related technologies in which there's a lot that's still very, very unclear. Andrew Moore says, we're at 1935 in aeronautic development. That is, in the very early stages of the development of this technology. Someone a bit more blunt put it this way and said, AI at the moment is dumber than a 5-year-old and no smarter than a rat. So we have a technology that's already being trotted out, that's being utilized, a complex of technologies that we don't really fully understand. And as I'm going to suggest, even the people who created these technologies don't really understand them yet. I won't cover, this could be a whole course, this could be a whole year of lectures on the various uses of AI. I'll just mention some of the obvious ones, things that you all know. So far, I would say AI has advanced most in the consumer realm, companies like Amazon and Google and so forth, in the area of finance, to amass data for loan decisions, for stock and investment analysis, in transportation, obviously self-driving cars, in healthcare, where in fact there are some very promising potential uses, for elder care, for the monitoring of vital health data, like blood pressure and blood sugar levels. But I'm going to focus on its uses in governance, in particularly the governance of smart cities and of public service delivery. Now, smart cities is a good place to start because I would remind you that perhaps the most striking social change in our era has been the urbanization of the world. If you look at the population of the globe in 1950 and in 2050, it's a perfect X because it's a reversal of a world in 1950 which was 30% urban and 70% rural, and by 2050 will be exactly the opposite. 70% of the world population living in cities, only 30% in the countryside. So this is a huge challenge. Governing complex organisms like New York City, like Beijing, all the great urban centers which are growing very fast, is a huge challenge. How to deliver services to people packed ever more tightly in growing numbers in a limited space. And one of the problems, just to give you, I'm going to try as we go along to give you very concrete examples of both positive and negative uses of artificial intelligence. But one of the big issues, and some of you who do urban studies will know this term very well, is what's called siloing. A lot of cities are managed in a way that various municipal services, police, fire, sanitation, transportation, operate in separate silos and don't always communicate with one another. And this is really not going to be able to be sustained much into the future as these organisms grow more complex. I'll give you a great example. Last year, when Hurricane Harvey hit Houston, of course, a lot of emergency calls started to come in. People needed to be rescued. And like New York, they had a 911 emergency number system. But it was solely the silo of the police department. And what happened to that system is that it crashed. It completely failed. And it failed because the silo of the police response system was not articulated with other emergency services in the city. By contrast, when Hurricane Sandy came to New York, the 911 system had an automatic trigger when it became overloaded to shift to the police department. So it was a seamless transition, and no emergency calls during Hurricane Sandy were lost, whereas many hundreds, thousands of people in Houston could not reach emergency services. So this is where siloing has to be conquered to run these complex cities properly, and artificial intelligence offers some real solutions. I also remember about 10 years ago, we were working in China, advising some governments in a big city in China. And this is the same situation where the different departments didn't talk to each other. And I said, well, if there's an emergency, if there's a chemical spill, how will your mayor's office talk to your fire department? And he said, well, we'll call each other on the cell phone. I mean, so this is how siloing is a problem in many cities around the world. There are some things that we have to face, which is that there are AI technologies already being deployed that are deeply flawed. introduction of any new technology always brings with it enormous enthusiasm and momentum to implement it because it offers such promise. But in fact, there are, in the rush to deploy these technologies, there's some real problems. And I have two, I think, striking examples. The first one, which you might, in this room, a lot of you might have read about because it was covered very well by the New York Times, had to do with facial recognition technology, which of course is very controversial and has both great potential and great dangers attached to it. There are currently 117 million Americans in law enforcement networks already embedded in facial recognition technology. But it is very lightly regulated at present. And recently, the MIT Media Lab, with which one of our speakers, Ronaldo, is affiliated, did a study of 3 leading facial recognition systems already being used in the United States. They are by 2 in the US, Microsoft and IBM, and a third one from China called MEGV. And what they found was that the inequalities and the biases of human beings and of the society we live in had been inadvertently built into these systems. As you know, the power of any artificial intelligence system is only as good as the data you feed to it. So the more data, the more accurate it is. And what they found was that the facial recognition systems of all 3 companies had very high error rates that had to do with race. And what they found was that error rates, that is misidentifications of faces, were between 21 and 35% for darker-skinned females versus less than 1% for light-skinned males. So this is a flawed technology. IBM and Microsoft rushed to the podium to say, we know, we're fixing it, it's okay, we're rolling out next week a better version. But in the meantime, these systems had already been deployed, and we can assume that there were people whose lives were impacted very negatively by these flaws in the technology. We know also, of course, that facial recognition is extensively used in China. It's used for some commercial purposes, online payment, which is far, far ahead of the United States at the moment, in banking, in ride-sharing services like Uber, Didi in China, Didi. But it's also used in a more ominous way for surveillance of citizens in certain parts of China, particularly in Xinjiang province, the Muslim province in the far west of China. So one of my messages is that, and it's not American, it's not Chinese, it's a human characteristic that sometimes the most hopeful and exciting developments are also at the same time, simultaneously, the most dangerous and the most ominous. And you can't extricate the good from the bad. We have to. That's what these dialogues, these discussions are about. A second example of a current technology that's not working very well: crime prediction algorithms. Many states in the US are already using a system called Compass. It's by a company called Equivant. And Compass is a system that feeds data in and predicts recidivism, that is the likelihood of someone charged with a crime repeating that crime. And this data fed into Compass is used to make decisions about bail, that is whether someone is put in jail or allowed bail or what amount of bail. And it's also used in sentencing in a number of states. And researchers at Dartmouth College decided to test this system against, as it were, the man and the woman in the street. And what they did was to use a publicly available data from Broward County, Florida, which went back some years. So you could actually see how well the system had predicted whether people charged with crimes would be repeat offenders. So they had verifiable results. And then they measured it against, using a system that's online. It's Amazon. It's called Amazon Turk Measurement. It's a system that's used for commercial purposes, where companies can simply test reactions to a commercial product, and the people who respond get $1. So it's a marketing tool. So they measured this compass system, which has 137 separate data points to predict recidivism, and then they took people literally off the internet and gave them 7 data points, and guess what? The people on the internet did slightly better than Compass. So here is a system, a very expensive system that many states have bought into, that is no more effective than you or me or anyone else with no training in criminology to predict accurately whether an offender is likely to be a repeat offender. So these are scary ideas that technology is sometimes being used without it's the Frankenstein story, without thinking of the consequences of its deployment. In public policy, it seems to me there are 2 big questions. The first one is how governments can respond to changes that AI will bring, how to evaluate and how to regulate these new technologies. And equally important, something I've already alluded to, is how to use artificial intelligence to improve or enhance the functions of government. So let me run through those. Regulation is very tricky. It's not just in artificial intelligence. In many sectors of government, in this country and other countries, finding the right balance is very important. On the one hand, you don't want to, in any field, you don't want to stifle innovation, but you also need to protect the public against safety hazards. Self-driving cars are a good example of this. You have to be able to distinguish between big harms and small harms. Big harms, weapons that could kill thousands, if not millions of people, versus small harms, things like telemarketing, which annoys us all but won't kill us. Policy is always intended to maximize good outcomes and minimize bad ones. And as the discussion about artificial intelligence accelerates, and it is accelerating, we need to think about where it will take us. There are 3 big issues, I think, involved with the ongoing blossoming of artificial intelligence. The first is job and employment patterns. I think there's very little disagreement that it will change the labor and employment situation in the future. There's great disagreement about how much and what those changes will be, and I'll come back to that. Secondly, social welfare needs, how to provide services, particularly for the elderly, social policy issues. And finally, and something that's very close to my heart, and that's educational reform, because education is, the educational system, I think all of us in this room were brought up in, is not geared to the future that we all face. And I think Professor Sun will tell you a bit about that. And a 4th issue, and not a small one, is the extent to which, and it's an overarching issue, the extent to which new technologies might not decrease but actually increase inequality, social inequality. Inequality is a big problem in this country. It's a big problem in China. It's a big problem around the world. So let me run through those for you. We may be facing a world in which there's an entirely new configuration of employment. It is clear that machines will be able to replace some job functions, and it's likely that the jobs that will disappear are going to be on the middle and the lower end of the skills scale. So that has grave implications itself for the inequality element. As businesses invest in AI and related technologies, we're likely to see this happen increasingly, and it's already beginning to happen in some places. It's very interesting if you look at something from 2015. There's an online job and recruiting site called Glassdoor. Some of you may know it. And they published a report on the 25 highest paying jobs in the current market in the US. And many of these positions didn't even exist 40 years ago. They're job titles like software architect, software development manager, solutions architect, analytics manager, data scientist, security engineer, computer hardware engineer, database administrator, UX designer, and so forth. If you look back to the 70s or 80s, there were no such job titles, or virtually none. So what we have is a situation where, in fact, 30 or 40 years from now, there may be a whole new set of job titles that we can't even envision. So that suggests a real public policy challenge, which is that the structure of the job world is going to change. There will be jobs disappearing, but also new jobs appearing. And as I'm going to come back to in a minute, jobs that we're not necessarily effectively training people for. The social policy issues will be that we need to strengthen the mechanisms and programs for people in a world where many people will work less hours. That's the other change, kind of structural change that's going to happen. We will need to think, and this is a particular American problem, about delivering social benefits such as health care, pensions, disability payments outside of employment. Social Security is based on employment. But we're going to have to disentangle that from the employment system increasingly in the future if those services are to be delivered. And we're going to have to create new, innovative mechanisms to provide those services. Some of the solutions that have been proposed and in fact are already being tried, in this case in Finland, is BMI, basic minimum income, the idea of providing a basic living payment to people regardless of their employment status. Another one that I particularly like is the idea of creating social credits for volunteer work. That is, if people are working less hours, that they can put time into socially beneficial projects like elderly care, a range of other socially beneficial services that in fact demand human and not artificial intelligence, and in return receive social credits toward a pension, toward a simulation or another version of what we think of as Social Security. There are a lot of people working on that issue now. The tax code will have to be revised. So these are all issues surrounding social policy. But to me, one of the most urgent ones, because there's no short-term solution. It's a solution that has to be implemented now to be effective, and that's education. Some of you be familiar with the work of Andrew McAfee, who said recently, our primary education system is doing a pretty good job at turning out the kinds of workers we needed 50 years ago. Basic skills such as the ability to follow instructions, execute defined tasks with some level of continuity and reliability, but not to do things like negotiate, provide loving and compassionate care, motivate a team of people, design a great experience, realize what people need and want, and figure out the next problem to work on and how to solve it. I think that's very good. I think that's a good, in a nutshell, description of the challenge we face in the educational field. We need to completely rethink how we educate our children and the next generations. One of the solutions, clearly, and again, there are a lot of innovators working on this. The happy news is that this is not ignored, that people all over the world, I'm involved with a very exciting education project in China that's attempting to, along these same lines, to redefine what it means to educate kids from pre-K, starting with pre-K, and to build into these next generations the idea of lifelong learning, that learning is something that never stops, that has to keep going, and that as the circumstances surrounding a human's life changes, that you have to learn sometimes new skills and new ways of dealing with the world. So governments need to play not just an active role, but a leadership role in nurturing a new generation of citizens who can function effectively and happily in a tech-based economy. And I want to, I'll take a few more minutes of your time to say something about the role of government, and in particular to look at the US and China and a few other countries, major emerging economies. New technologies are inevitably disruptive. And that's one of the features that we have to cope with. They disengage certain things we've all taken for granted and present us with new circumstances. If you look at three of the most important technological innovations in the last couple of centuries in the United States, what you'll see is that they were all generated and powered, partially at least, by government support, government intervention, and government encouragement and incentivization. In the 19th century, the development of the railroads, which was a big engine of economic growth in the 19th century in America. In the 1950s, the federal highway system, which is quite extraordinary and now in great disrepair and need of fixing. And then more recently, the development of the internet. All of these showed the U.S., I think, that it's not enough simply to fund basic research, but you have to nurture an environment in which various stakeholders collaborate together, universities, private companies, and government together in partnership. Right now, we have a situation in America where, as you no doubt know very well, where most of the research on AI is being conducted in the private sector. And not just in the private sector, but in the hands of a few mega players, primarily Google and Facebook. And actually number two, those are number one and number three in the world. Number two is Baidu in China. Finding this balance between public and private engagement in the development and in the regulation of new technologies is something that has to be started right now. In the US in 2015, non-classified artificial intelligence research funding from the US government was $1.1 billion. From the private sector, it was $8 billion. So this is a bad imbalance. It has to change. The government needs to be an enabler to offer incentives and encouragement to the development of positive new technologies, to create an infrastructure for innovation. China has actually provided an interesting example, and maybe not the one that all of you in this room might think. The role of government in China recently has been to initiate major initiatives for not just public funding, but the public encouragement of research. In 2017, they issued just recently in July, the next generation AI platform. And it's really not just pumping money into AI, but instead it's a wish list. It's an encouragement to local officials and to companies to collaborate, to universities as well, together to create new public goods in AI. Goldman Sachs and a number of other very extensive studies have shown that China is catching up to the US in the development of AI technology very fast. So this is a trend that's coming. 2 days ago in India, in Mumbai, was announced the creation with $30 million of funding of a new institute which will focus on using AI to address global social development challenges. The family's name is Wadhwani, two brothers. It's a nonprofit research institute. It has as its supporting partners the state government of Maharashtra, Mumbai University, the Indian Institutes of Technology, which are all over the country, the University of Southern California, and New York University. They're going to focus on things like improvements in agriculture, and as you may know, food supply, global food supply, is an urgent challenge. If we do not increase food production quickly, the world will run out of food by 2050. There will not be enough food to support the population of the world in 2050. They will focus also on things like training community health workers and remedying high dropout rates in rural schools. So these kinds of cross-sectoral projects, and there are similar ones in China, are what we need to have happen, I think, in the United States. The picture at the moment is ominous. A reporter the other day asked our Secretary of the Treasury, Mr. Mnuchin, what he thought about artificial intelligence and the challenge to employment, and he said, and I quote, AI workforce issues are not even on our radar screen. That's scary. I'm going to end here and turn things over to our speakers, but I want to end with one thought for you. Predicting the future is really tricky, and some of the worst predictors of the future are people who are seen as the experts. And I want to read you 3 very short quotes to illustrate this, because everything you're going to hear us say today is open for debate and open for question. In 1927, on the eve of the advent of talking pictures, H.M. Warner, the founder of Warner Brothers Studios, said, "Who the hell wants to hear actors talk?" In 1943, Thomas Watson, the chairman of IBM, the first developer of computers, said, "I think that there's maybe a world market for 5 computers." In 1977, Ken Olsen, who was the chairman and founder of DEC, Digital Equipment Company, said, "There's no reason why anyone would want to have a computer in their home." And finally, so those are all people who really underestimated the technologies that we're developing, but there's also overestimation. And I leave you finally with this quote, which was the cover of Life magazine. Now, some of you here remember Life magazine very well. Others of you don't even know what it is. But Life magazine was the trendsetter in the 1950s and 60s in America. And in 1963, 55 years ago, the cover of Life magazine had the following headline: "Automation is really here. Jobs go scarce. Point of no return for everybody." So this is a warning to us all of how predicting the future is tricky. I think that AI has great potential. It also has great dangers. We need to have dialogue. We need to be getting people from the citizenry, from the universities, from the government, from the private sector, from the nonprofit sector, together to assess and to make decisions and to create new awareness of these issues. Thanks very much. I'm going to turn the podium over to Ronaldo Lemos, who will speak next.
Right. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Robin. It's great to hear your words. And as Robin mentioned, I'm very much involved with public policy making from the perspective of developing countries. I'm a professor here at SIPA, where I teach a course called Technology Policy in the Developing World. Thank you so much. And one of the goals of this specific course is precisely to try and understand what are the policy challenges for everything that we're talking here, artificial intelligence. In the course, I also discuss issues like the blockchain, smart cities, but from the perspective of a developing country. So my goal here is to provide a little bit of a framework so that we can discuss a few policy issues. So let me start by something that Robin did as well, by trying to get a definition about what we are talking about. So when we talk about artificial intelligence, we are actually talking about so many different things, so many different disciplines that are very complex in themselves. So we are talking about machine learning, we are talking about deep learning, we are talking about natural language processing, algorithmic game theory, all of these being put together under this umbrella of this term called artificial intelligence. So it's interesting because this concept, it actually goes back to 1956 when Dartmouth College basically organized a first conference on the idea of artificial intelligence. And at that time, John McCarthy, one of the founders of this field, basically defined artificial intelligence as the science and engineering of making intelligent machines. So this is the, let's say, old definition. The one that is more current right now is actually the one by Russell and Norvig, who are the authors of a very well-adopted manual on artificial intelligence, and they basically say that artificial intelligence is the study and design of intelligent agents, where an intelligent agent is a system that perceives its environment and takes actions that maximize its chances of success. So my emphasis here is to this idea of agents, because that's what we are doing. We are building entities that are capable on acting on our behalf or on the behalf of whoever came up with their programming or their algorithms and so on. So that's, I think, a more satisfactory idea of artificial intelligence for the moment we are living right now. That's been called sort of a new spring for artificial intelligence. There's a lot of excitement regarding applications of AI. So this is the moment we are. So there are a couple of things that AI is really good at doing. And one of them is actually playing games. So you might have heard that in 1996, an IBM computer was actually capable of beating Garry Kasparov in the game of chess. And from that moment onwards, we human beings have lost entirely the possibility of beating a computer in the game of chess. So there is not going to be a super smart person that will be born decades from now that will be capable of reclaiming that capability. Computers will be possibly forever better than human beings in playing chess. The same thing happened with a much more complex game, which is the game of Go, very popular in Korea, China, and the combinations of that game there are more atoms in the universe. Actually, there are more possibilities of combinations in that game than there are atoms in the universe. So this was like a recent advance, and a computer built by Google called DeepMind was finally capable of beating not only the number 2 player of Go, a Korean named Lee Sedol, but also the number 1 player of Go. And recently, a new computer was built, a new process was built, and played with this former computer, and it's already capable of beating it 100-0. So basically, we are in a moment in which we have also lost the possibility of beating machines in the game of Go. But then some of you might say, well, these are table games, that's all right. They happen like in this abstract level. There is an ongoing effort which is called the RoboCup, which is an effort to bring together robotics and artificial intelligence. And the goal of the RoboCup is basically that by the middle of the 21st century, a team of fully autonomous humanoid robots will be soccer players and will win a soccer game complying with the official rules of FIFA against the winner of the most recent World Cup, which I expect will be Brazil. That's where I come from. So basically, this is the expectation that when you put together robotics and AI, there will be things that we imagine that only us human beings are capable of doing, but actually we are moving very fast in a moment in which machines will actually be able to do a lot of things that we thought were exclusive of human beings. So other usual applications of AI that I think are worth mentioning is creating, for instance, virtual assistants operated by voice. We are very much in a moment in which voice is becoming a dominant application. Not sure if any of you have already purchased one of these home assistants like Alexa or Google Home, but they are basically changing the game regarding what an interface can do. And one of the consequences of this change is that you don't actually visualize the code. When you are on a web browser, you can actually select a function that says view code, and you can actually see the code that is in the background of that particular browser. However, that is not possible when you move into voice interfaces. So basically, you lose a lot of the knowledge that is widespread if you're a programmer of a website or the web as we came to know it. And this is a significant change. It will also have policy implications, some of which I will discuss in a moment. So other applications for AI, like self-driving cars that were mentioned before, recognizing natural language as we speak. We are also on the outset of the possibility of plugging an earplug on your ears that will be capable of translating languages as we go about. So the need for a translator today probably will not be that necessary in a couple of years, because we'll be able to travel and speak to other people, and translation will be provided immediately as we speak. And this is certainly really exciting. And we are very much in a moment in which this is actually a possibility of happening quite soon. So, so many things that machines can do right now, as I mentioned. And other things include social network analysis, the design of proteins for genetic engineering, fraud detection, and so on. So one of the concerns regarding AI, and there's a very interesting report that was published actually 3 days ago, is what if you define or you start using AI against the public interest? So I'll just give you an example. You all have heard of like computer viruses that spread what is called malware. And a lot of these viruses are spread by means of techniques of social engineering. So basically, you receive an email that appears to be from someone that you know, but when you click on it, it's actually someone that crafted that email to actually make you think that you were clicking a legitimate message, but it was actually sent to you by a hacker or someone with means purposes. So basically, this is happening quite a lot. Computer hackers are getting more and more proficient in creating these social engineering schemes. What if you start using AI for that? So basically, what if you transform the internet in a giant A/B testing platform regarding strategies to make social engineering more effective and make a lot of people actually falling into the possibility of installing malware software in their computers. So this is an actual possibility. This is something that is being debated as we speak this week. And there's a lot of concern about what is going to happen if you actually turn a lot of these applications that are very positive against the public interest. So certainly one policy question that we have to ask is, how do we make sure that we keep developing AI in the interest of people and not against the public interest? So this is a very important question, and it's something that we will have to think about a lot in the near future. I believe many here are actually familiar with this debate whether artificial intelligence will create jobs or eliminate jobs. This is one of the most debated and discussed aspects of AI. Of course, there are arguments pointing in the direction of both sides. For instance, if you read the paper, it's a very famous one by Carl Frey and Michael Osborne at the University of Oxford. They basically claim that 47% of US jobs are going to be automated and therefore disappear in the next 20 to 30 years. So this is the type of claim that make people really alarmed. And there is even like a graph with professions that are most likely to be automated or not. So some professions are it's very improbable that they're going to be automated anytime soon. And One of these is, for instance, nurses. So it's very hard to automate the job of a nurse. However, if you are a taxi driver or if you are a telemarketer, you'd better start to be prepared, because there's a very likelihood that in the next few years something is going to change in the job that you are at right now. So this is one of the points, and of course this comes from these more pessimistic ideas regarding AI. But on the other side, you have the more optimistic views. So there's a lot of people that actually claim that AI is not going to get rid of jobs, or at least anytime soon. And what this side of the argument basically claims is that if you look into the numbers, and that's how you measure and you get some predictability of what's going to happen, we should be okay. So for instance, there's a lot of numbers, for instance, about productivity, which is actually not increasing, but declining. So productivity in the US from 1947 to 1973 used to increase 3% by year. In 2007, that number was 1.2% a year. And in 2015, 2016, the number was 0.6% a year. So this is maybe something that tells us that there is no rush for automation, or at least automation has not appeared yet in the economic statistics. More than that, there are indications in the US that salaries are increasing. Studies by the OECD, for instance, claim that the number of jobs that will be automated is actually 9% in the next 20 years and not 47. And of course, there are people that claim that the history of automatic bank tellers, so ATMs, show something completely different. So for instance, the number of bank tellers actually increased between 2000 and 2010 in spite of the fact that ATMs became prevalent everywhere. And of course, there is a forecast that this number of bank workers will actually decline in the next decade, but that decline will be 8% and not 47 or anything like that. So these are some of the let's say, bright side view, the more optimistic view regarding artificial intelligence. And I think it's important to mention both because as Robin has mentioned, it's very hard to predict the future. So we either might indeed get automation very closely, or maybe it's going to take much more time than we are probably thinking about right now. The other point that I would like to mention to you is some political consequences of artificial intelligence. So one of the things that I find fascinating is how artificial intelligence is actually changing signals between what we conventionally used to think as the right and the left. So for instance, former Brazilian president Dilma Rousseff, she visited one of the Google plants in California just a couple of years ago, where she asked to take a ride at a self-driving car at Google. And she was completely fascinated. And she left the car and she said, I want to bring this to Brazil right away. This is great. Well, President Dilma, she used to be the head of the Workers' Party in Brazil. And it's actually very fascinating that as the head of the Workers' Party, she was so enthusiastic about bringing self-driving cars, which would probably eliminate the jobs of like 8 or 10 million people in the country. So at the same time, you see people like Martin Wolf, who's a chief writer, an economist for the Financial Times, which is not your usual left-wing publication. And Martin Wolf has a very interesting essay in which he defends and basically claims for the creation of a universal basic income, which is something that is usually attached to the left. So there is a sort of an inversion of signals when the leader of a big country with 200 million people like Brazil, and the leader of the Workers' Party is fascinated by self-driving cars, while Silicon Valley and other typical, very much liberal entities think about universal basic income, which is usually, or at least until very recently, viewed as a left-wing platform. So this is something that I find very interesting. Some people claim that universal basic income might be a distraction regarding having to discuss a much more profound issue, which is who owns the machines? Who is going to have the property of the machines that we are creating? So basically, if professors like Richard Freeman, they claim that if there is one way in which workers and everyone can have a stake in the machines that we are going to build, we will be all right. However, if the property of the machines are extremely highly concentrated, then we might have, deepening of inequality and a lot of other economic and social issues. So this is one of the debates that are happening in the field of policy that I think we should also raise from that perspective. So to conclude, I would like just to present some last policy issues about what to do regarding artificial intelligence. There is a number of issues that we have to think about. So for instance, data ownership. Who owns the data? That also matters. If data is extremely concentrated, that is probably a huge obstacle for other companies or entrants to actually step in the field of artificial intelligence. More than that, there is a lot of people concerned about the issue of transparency. So how do you make sure that artificial intelligence decisions or algorithmic decisions as a whole will become transparent? So to conclude, I would like to present 5 policy measures that have emerged recently, and they are basically supported by a number of researchers that and should be in the minds of everyone working with public policy. So when we think about algorithms and artificial intelligence as a whole, we have to keep in mind at least 5 principles. So one of them is the principle of responsibility, explainability, accuracy, auditability, and fairness. So each one of these principles entails a very complex debate, but they are, in my view, the beginning of a very important conversation we will have to have regarding the issue of AI in public policy. That's it. Thank you so much.
Now we have Professor Sun Liangang. He will speak in Chinese. His translator is Sam Mosca.
Yeah.
And he's on.
刚才你们听了2位老师讲的啊，没有什么感觉，我看着。
I don't think that you guys had any special emotion or feeling when you heard these 2 professors talk.
是讲的不精彩呢，还是你们这屋里
Are you guys awake out
都
there?
困了？我看你们 ，Oh my God， 都困了啊！好，听听刚才两位老师讲的啊，我也听着有点困，就是太学术了。
You know what? To be honest, I would listen when I was listening to them. I also got a little bit tired.
你从现在开始 你们听听大师是怎么讲的啊。
From now on, you guys are going to listen to a
因为
real
我
speaking professional.
OK， 因为我不是老师，我是大师啊。
Because I'm not just a teacher. I'm a really important teacher, a really big professor.
你们听哲学家跟艺术家是如何看待 AI 的。
So you guys are going to hear how art and philosophy look at artificial intelligence.
OK， 咱们现在开始了啊。
We're going to start.
我们不能用技术跟科学的意义去看待 AI。
We cannot use only technology and science applications of mind to look at artificial intelligence.
我们要站在 idea 思想的高度去看待它对人类是如何影响的。
We have to look at the ideal ideology and ethics of humanity in order to correctly approach artificial intelligence.
它是如何颠覆现有社会的。
So we have to look at how artificial intelligence is going to undermine a lot of the systems we have in place in society today.
这些体制内的人，他们想维持这个体制。
So if you look at these professors and what their backgrounds are in, they're here to preserve the current state of society and how.
其实从现在开始是颠覆性的成为常态。
From now on, from today onward, we have to take the revolutionary or overturning approach when we look at society and how we approach it.
从经济、政治到法律，对这个体制是如何一步一步的颠覆的。
So we have to look at economics and policy and look at how these current states will then turn and override or upgrade our current legal system.
OK， 我们每一个人都不相信这个政府。
Everybody here, nobody trusts the government, right?
OK， 但是又没有办法，
But we don't have a choice
因为他们是个暴力集团。
because they're more like a protection racket.
你用你的选票选的是个王八蛋，怎么办？怎么办？没办法，你没办法，因为他们在操弄这个世界。
So we use our votes and we only have an option between the one guy that's there or nobody.
OK，
So we don't really have an option, but
Okay.
we vote anyway because that's the system that we're in.
所以我的理念就是如何用智能去取代现有的制度。
So how do we use intelligence to overturn or make better the system of policy that we live in today?
如何用科技取代人治？
How do we use technology to replace the power of the people in government? Or
现在的政治太烂了。
right now, the policies are not good. They don't reflect what the people need.
这个现有的制度根本不适应了我们人类的未来的发展。
So right now, the system is limited because it doesn't reflect how society will or should be evolve into the future.
科技进步，淘汰这些制度，他们定的制度是他们的利益既得者，不是我们每个人的利益既得者。
So in the future, when technology evolves to allow for the perfection or improvement of the legal system, then it will reflect accurately what the people actually need, and not the emotions or the will of the individuals in authority positions.
他们用骗选票，跟掏我们兜里的钱，印钞票来维持着他们的权利。
So the politicians of today, they use votes and money as tools to maintain
我们
themselves in the
我们每一
authority
个人
positions.
忍无可忍了，忍无可忍。
So everybody, we have to trust this human system, the humanity system.
不管是希拉里还是川普，我们都不高兴。
It doesn't matter if it's Trump or Hillary, nobody's happy.
怎么办？怎么
What do
办
we do?
好 ？OK， 科技进步， 让我们不会相信他们，我们相信 AI。
So now that technology is developed, we don't have to trust them anymore. We trust the algorithms. We trust the artificial intelligence.
数据政府、数字化的政府、科学的政府，代替这些人质来管理我们的事务。
A government of data, a data governance, can replace this government by people.
用大数据、用科学、用 AI、用现有的科技进步改造这个世界，我们还有机会。
If we can use technology and use the algorithms that are at our fingertips, then we can improve the
我
modern
们
society.
根本不相信那些政客，他们在骗我们。
Don't trust the politicians. They're cheating all of us.
我们相信数据，
We believe in data.
我们的大数据让每一个人他的利益最大化，这就是我的算法。
So we can take big data and make the greatest benefit of each person reflected in the algorithms that govern society.
数据代替谎言，你们选择哪个？
So if big data can replace lies, which one are you going to believe?
数字化政府 ，AI 的世界，智能化的世界代替现有的制度，这就是我的理念。
So my idea is that the big data and science can replace any kind of imperfection created by a legal system that was made by humans.
这就是我提出的社会3.0。
This is what I'm talking about when I say life 3.0.
我们由人治到法治，到智能社会，这是一个转变的过程。
So there's a process of the development of society from a society of humanity to a society of law and order, and now to a society of technology and automation.
我们要用科技推翻现有的政府。
We have to use science to improve and show today's government how we want to be regulated and how we want to live our lives.
比特币的出现，正是我这个理论的验证。
So the advent of Bitcoin completely reflects everything that I'm telling you right.
人们不再相信政府印的钱，他们的公信力没有，老百姓不认了。
So the people don't have to trust the money printed by the government anymore. And in fact, Bitcoin is proof that they don't. Bitcoin is a money created by the people that the people can trust.
他们不光是骗钞票，他们还在印钞票，他们还在从我们兜里印钞票。
Not only is the government confiscating and kind of manipulating or diluting the power of our vote, but they're also diluting the power of our economic purchasing power. They're diluting the power of our money.
我们在恐惧 AI 的时候，我们想一想 ，AI 比那些政客谁坏呀？那政客坏呀！
So once we have a fully developed, artificially intelligent governance software in place, who's going to trust the politicians anymore?
所以说，未来谁对我好，不要听他们谎言，听数据，大数据的算法，每一个人都是一个神经元。
So in the future, we won't have to be misled by people's false words. We can hear what they say, and the algorithms will tell us if they're being truthful or not.
这套2.0的制度将不存在。
So the society 2.0, the society of law and order, it's already gone.
我们区块链技术就是去中心化、去中间化。我们每一个人为什么要有政府做媒介呢？而且它还是个不好的，它还是个互相欺骗的。那我们就人与人之间，我们不要委托这个坏的中间人，我们要去中心化、去中间化，这才是2.0、3.0社会的一个基本原则。
So what can blockchain do for us? blockchain can replace the middleman position that the government has always served as kind of the intermediary between people. Blockchain can preserve all of your data immutably and not let people take it or change it, which means that between you and somebody else, no longer do you need the laws of the government. That's all you need is the data stored immutably on the blockchain to tell you who's who and what they're doing.
所以未来没有未来了，未来已经到来了。
In the future, there's no future. It's already here.
幻想成为现实，
The dreams have become reality.
你们还没毕业就失业了，
You guys haven't even
这就是现
graduated,
有的社会。
and there's no
Master-
industry for you.
毕业就失业了，因为你读的都是他们骗你的东西，他不真东西他不教你。
How come once you guys graduate, you won't even be able to find jobs? Because you've been studying the things that they told you would help you, but are not actually the things that will help you get employed.
因为老师也是穷人，
Because teachers are poor too.
也是被他们骗的那波人里的，
Yeah, and they've also been cheated by the system.
他们不是利益既得者，
They're not here to get benefit from the system.
我们现在就是要用技术，用 AI 推翻这个政府，推翻这些利益既得者。
We have to take AI and use it to get back, to take over the way that the government is run and the way that all these things work so that the benefit can come back into the hands of the people.
但我这不是政治运动，
But what I'm telling you is not a policy perspective.
我这是科技进步，
I'm talking about scientific advance.
科技让每一个人非常强大，可以对抗这个政府。
The prospect of technology to improve the lives of the individual is massive. We can use it to fix our current government.
比如说斯诺登，一个人就把美国政府给玩的团团转，为什么？科技呀、
So look at the power of kind of the Silk Road, right? Snowden.
Yeah.
Snowden. Look at what Snowden did. He took away the power of the government to regulate the people with these that they were using technology to bully the people without anyone even knowing.
美元是美国政府的核心价值，
So the core quality, the core product of the U.S. government is the U.S. dollar.
比特币的出现颠覆了它的神坛的地位。
Once Bitcoin came around, it completely revolutionized the
Money,
stability
no.
of the economic platform.
Money no， 颠覆了它。
Bitcoin overturned
coin
U.S. dollars.
数字货币代替了我们每一个人的交易过程。
So now, cryptocurrencies can replace all of our peer-to-peer interactions,
一个比特币，
transactions.
一个小小的比特币，颠覆了那么强大的美元地位。
One little Bitcoin turned over the entire superiority of the U.S. economic
1
system.
万美元买一个，
$10,000 U.S. can get you one Bitcoin.
怎么办呀？
What are we gonna do?
怎么办？2.0的社会结束了，
There is no more life 2.0, the life of law and order.
我们不要为历史哭泣。
We don't have to look at history anymore.
Modern art， 现在的社会不存在了。
The modern society is already
在人文主义、民主、法治、价值这些建立的这个政府、这个社会不存在了。
democracy, law, policy, order from the government of people is already gone.
哦，我们觉得天塌下来一样。
It's like
随便翻。
随便 OK.
OK， 但是我们每一个人强大了。
Despite the fact that it's almost like social Armageddon, every single individual is now empowered.
不是政府让我们强大了，
It's not the government that enabled
是
this.
科技 进步让我们强大了。
It's the advancement of society that allowed each person that allowed the empowerment of the individual.
这个势头啊，这个势头势不可挡。
This problem it's bigger than you can even imagine.
所以很多政府呢，对这个数字货币，对这个比特币，又怕又爱，又不能把它怎么样。
So the world governments, they love Bitcoin, they hate Bitcoin, but there's nothing they can do to regulate it.
我们不是现代的继续，我们是颠覆这个现代。
So the technology we have today is really and truly capable of completely overturning the entire political and economic system.
如果你听完我的还发困，那你就完了。
If you're still tired after listening to
Okay.
me talk, then there's no hope for you.
老师的东西是要发困的，大
Teacher,
师的东西不会发困的。
whatever the teachers tell you, it's going to make you tired and bored. But
Okay.
I'm not a teacher. I'm a really big, important professor, so you can't get bored.
好，咱们现在回答问题。
Questions?
OK。
Let me intervene here.
Oh yeah.
Let's take questions from the audience. We'll ask you please to identify yourself and where you're from. You can address questions to any of us. Try and keep them questions rather than comments, although comments are part of the texture of things. Thanks.
OK。
Okay. I guess I'll share. Yeah. Okay, you start. Yeah.
Okay.
Stand up. And speak up because we don't have mics to pass around.
So I'm Varshit. I'm a software engineer from Wayfair in Boston. I'm visiting New York. So my question is, so I feel that there's a gap between the engineers or the like so-called experts in AI who implement or develop these systems and public policy makers or like when these systems are implemented for the public good. So how exactly are we planning to bridge this gap between these technologists and policymakers? Because I feel that there is there is a missing piece when it comes to public policymakers who try to understand how these systems work, and I feel that technologists are not doing a good job in communicating how flexible these systems can be and how it can be implemented. So how are we planning to bridge this gap?
OK。
We'll start with him. I have an answer to him.
你这问题呢，怎么说呢？就是我们的教育出了问题，它是分科制，就技术的就是技术，政治的就是政治，这个是我们教育的缺陷。
So he says that the problem stems from the structure of our educational system. So you have people that are trained to be technologists, and you have people that are trained to be policymakers, and the problem roots from there.
我们这些政客，就你们以后出来都是进政府的，就学怎么骗人，不知道为什么骗人，这就是分科制的原因。
So the problem is the way that we categorize and split up the different faculties and roads of study. So everyone here studying government is they're teaching you how to go about and use the system to cheat other people, and that's what you're learning.
OK， 下一个。
I'll add something to that. First of all, I would say Professor Sun and I have spoken together before. He is what I would call a visionary. And I've learned that the way you begin with visionaries is to say, I agree with everything you said. There, I said it. I agree very much with what he just said about the education system. I think that just as we have siloing in government, we have siloing in education. And I can give you hundreds of examples from my own experience. And in this building, I spent 25 years of my professional life in this building, of people that don't speak to each other across disciplines. They share the same hallway, they share the same dining room, but they don't speak to each other about their work and they don't understand each other's work. So what you're talking about is a very real problem. It's a problem even more in the sense that the technology training is and you're a product of this, I assume, is rather narrow. It's very high level, it's very effective, you're very talented people, but on the one hand, the policymakers aren't engaged with listening to you and listening to how this technology is developing and where it can go, good and bad both. And you in turn aren't getting input from policymakers. And this is a real problem. But he's right that it has to come from a system of education that integrates technological development with ethical development, with educational development. Ronaldo?
I find this vision really, provoking. I think we need visions like that because it makes people go out their comfort zones. So I think that's great that Professor is raising this position. I don't agree with most of his claims, but I do agree as well that we need to do something, and the old solutions will not be adequate for what the challenge that we are going to face from now on. So I think starting with education, we need a complete revamp and a complete reform. More than that, the state, as we have built it, is going to go through a transformation as well. Because disruption, as we know it, it affects not only the private sector, like the music industry, or the film industry, or the car business. It is going to affect the state as well. So we are in a moment of revisiting some of the foundational institutions we've taken for granted. So in that sense, I think Professor is very right to call our attention that something new is happening, and we will probably have to think about new forms of dealing with the challenge that we are going to face. Sir.
My name is Jack Kahn. I'm an alumnus of Columbia College, class of 1959.
Speak up.
My problem with your vision is the ultimate question: how can you trust the integrity of the individual in control of the big data?
Okay.
世间万物总有一个主宰，啊，你信者信，不信者不信，这个可能外国人听不明白。
So maybe there's a chance that foreigners won't be able to understand this. There's also a chance.
我信上帝，我信上帝 ，God，
He
我
believes
信
in
上
God.
帝，我是绝对的信，
There's no.
这就叫信仰。
There's no barrier to his faith.
这个算法不是
There's no limit. There's no
Yeah.
barrier. There's nothing in the way of his faith.
Okay.
He 100% believes in God. There's no doubt.
这个算法不是不是一个工程师，不是一个人做的。
An algorithm is not just one engineer or one
比如
worker.
说神经算法，人工智能的神经算法不是一个人做的，它是重叠的，它是神经元系统，它不断的升级，它是自动升级的。
So-
其实比相信一个人更应该相信科学。
So he's saying that an algorithm is actually the composition of many different, not only many different people, but also many different algorithms that feed data into kind of an inherited almost system of algorithms, and then older algorithms that came before the algorithm that kind of makes the system. So you're putting your trust into the science, which is more trustworthy than
Yes.
one person.
Whoever owns the data controls the algorithm and the data. How can you trust the integrity of that individual?
OK， 控制算法的就不是人，如果是人，我们就不信。
So he said, if he's controlling the algorithm, you cannot control the algorithm. The algorithm isn't a person.
integrity is nothing new.
Oh yeah，是
Yeah.
它是科学，是科学，
We're talking about science. We're not talking about the person.
不是人。
Humanist, I'm talking about integrity.
OK，所以说这些学文科的要有一点科学的认知。
So in order for this to work, we need the humanists to trust science just a little bit.
A little bit is okay.
好 ，OK。
But totally no.
Let's take another one. Tom?
Tom Lansner, I taught at SIPA for many years. I teach now at Sciences Po Paris and at Aga Khan University, Nairobi. Just to come back, actually following on this, to paraphrase Disraeli, there are three kinds of data. There are lies, damned lies, and big data. Perhaps, and we have to look at, as Dr. Lewis said, that algorithms are created by people. And what's dangerous is not that we don't trust the science of algorithms. They'll produce what they are meant to produce. But who makes this? Artificial intelligence would become really, it's an artifice of our intelligence. It's nothing more. It's what we feed it. It's the old saw, garbage in, gospel out, or gospel in, garbage out. And we are really becoming, it's not only an artifice of our intelligence, but it's an artifact of our intent. And the humanists among us, who are not technophobes, want to know how, indeed, we're going to trust a science that was created from a certain narrative. And from a Chinese narrative, perhaps just the name of Chunga, Chungwo. What does it mean? What does that mean? Chungwo. The name of China. Middle of the world? Well, on my American map, America is the middle of the world. So their competing narratives are going to come in, and they shape very much our quote-unquote scientific understanding of what the algorithms are going to give us. And they're going to reflect that kind of intent of the narratives, and not maybe necessarily based on some science that comes from outer space or somewhere in our mentality, which is pure, objective, and will bring us this better world. So, anybody who would like to react to that? Thank you.
我来讲啊，来讲
Okay, he wants to take this one.
这个
I'm not
怎么
that
说
big, but
我们现在的普通人啊，大多数人，我不是说99%的人，对 AI 有基本的认知是有问题的。
So 99% of us already looking at AI, we have problems with it. There's just it doesn't we can't trust it yet.
我们停留在一个技术层面上去看这个问题，就是这位先生的这个角度。
So he's saying that our friend the professor over here is we have to stand at the side of science to look at AI before taking the humanist approach.
OK，AI 绝对不是一个技术层面对人类社会的影响就那么简单。
So AI is not a technical. It's not a technical change to society. It's not going to affect society from a technological perspective.
OK，美国，他认为他是世界老大，
America believes we are number
OK，
one.
他面对的是人类的问题。
So what we're looking at is also kind of a person-to-person problem with the
这个问
governments.
题就得美国人面对，
So this problem is something Americans are going to have to face.
中国人面对的是吃饱肚子挣点钱。
Chinese faced a different set of problems. How do I eat so I'm full and make enough money so I'm rich?
OK，美国人是超人，要对付宇宙的人，中国人不需要，那是美国人的事儿。
The perspective of an American is I'm Superman and I'm going to take on the entire universe. But the Chinese perspective is not that way. It's much more.
因为美国
round.
是世界老大嘛
Because we're the number one in the world. The U.S. is
，America
number one.
number one 嘛，是吧？
对。
所以你要面对人类的事儿，中国人面对的是老百姓吃饱肚子那个挣点钱的事儿，所以不是一个层面。
So with this position of number one in the world, we have to face the entire crises that all of humanity faces. And, China can then sit and make sure that they've eaten until they're full and they've got enough money so they can become rich.
我来美国，我来美国，我就是要改变世界才来美国。
I didn't come to America for any reason. I came to America because I want to change the world.
我如果要是改变中国，我就不来美国了。
If I was going to change China, then I wouldn't come to America. I wouldn't come to America.
我面对的是人类的未来，人类如何面对人类的未来，并不是那个美国，是我们整个人类的问题，并不是一个民族、一个国家、一个区域的问题。
I came here because I want to help answer this humanitarian problem. How are we going to face the crisis that the number one country in the world has to face, the crisis of all humanity?
我每天想的都是我们人类还有没有未来的问题。
I'm still thinking every day, what is the future of humanity going to be like?
OK，
Question.
All right, my name is Higazi. I'm from Egypt. I work at the intersection of trying to model the complex realities of transportation in Africa. So when we talk a lot about AI and data, we often forget that the data is really a model for reality. We're trying to reflect what's happening. But sometimes that model doesn't exist. We have excellent language recognition for English. China is a developing country, but they have even better language recognition for Chinese. The same is not true for Arabic, and it's unlikely to develop for structural reasons, and it is almost impossible to develop in the current economy and system for languages down the purchasing power scale. African languages, and the smaller you get, the less likelihood you get the ability to automatically translate them. Good. My question is, this current system is very much economic and profit driven. So these technologies, even though they can be developed, it's highly unlikely that resources will go towards them. We asked a lot of questions about labor, about social challenges, about inequality challenges, but we always ask, like I find most of the debate is centered around within the American economy, expanding to the European economy, maybe even the Chinese and the developing countries that have the scale. India was mentioned to engage with that. What about the countries that don't have the scale to invest in that? Where are we going to be left?
That's a good. I'll start, maybe then Ronaldo and then Professor Sun. Sure. I think that's a very important observation. I think we tend to forget that a lot of the algorithms that we're currently living with have their origin in commercial ventures. And the relentless logic of those ventures, as you said, is money. So every click is a little piece of money. And if you play that logic out to its natural conclusion, then there is, as you rightly say, there's a hierarchy of value that starts with more technologically advanced countries, perhaps with languages that are a little more permeable by artificial intelligence or voice recognition than others. And that's a real problem that if we focus just on the technology, so this is where the interface between technology makers and policy makers has to come in, is to think about how to modify or reorient the technology towards the real world that you're talking about. So how do you move people around a city like Cairo efficiently, more efficiently? How do you perform the functions of government in a way that's more effective? And how do you spread the benefits of these technologies that work in some areas but not in others? That's a real issue.
Sure. So I think this is very important because it raises the problem that besides what we call big data, on the other side we have something that we can call no data. So for a lot of places in the world, there's simply no data at all. So in the city that I live, Rio de Janeiro, for instance, a lot of the significant part of the population live in shanty towns, so in favelas. When you go to Google Maps, which is something that a lot of people do here to get directions or something like that, and you look into these areas in which those favelas, those shanty towns are, they appear on Google Maps often as green areas or empty spaces. So, because there is no data, even though there is 1.5 million people living in areas like that. So that happens not only in Brazil, it happens like in Lagos in Nigeria. I'm sure in India a lot of places are like that too. So if you don't have the underlying basic data, you don't have anything else. Like the people that live in these places, they're not going to get drone delivery. They're not going to get basic services that depend on the map. So it's not only often the Google Maps that doesn't have that data, the state doesn't have that data. The state doesn't know the map for those areas, so that those people, they don't have an address. So without an address, you don't have garbage collection, post or mail delivery, you don't have electricity, you cannot hire cable TV or anything like that. So we have to remember that the blind spots are bigger than the big data. So we have more blind spots in the world than we have big data. And I think as what you said regarding Arabic as a language, it's the same regarding Portuguese or regarding, so many languages that are minority languages. And it's very hard to get like a functioning translation for those languages, or to get voice interface that is actually fully functional for those languages. So that's the point. I think besides thinking about big data, we have to think about no data as well.
Back there. You.
All right. Hey, how's it going? It's Travis, financial analyst. My question is about intentions and if they matter. Out of the PRC, with the last Congress, it seems like there's a lot of consolidation going on with Xi Jinping, and where you were talking about some of the articles coming out regarding the technology being used in more ominous ways. And especially out of the top 3 companies you listed, only one of them has direct ties to the state. Do intentions matter with where this technology is going regarding the creators of it? Is there a race? Should Western culture be interested in winning the race? And for Professor Sun, would this conversation even be possible in Peking's campus? Especially with some of your, which I agree, they're fascinating stuff, but I mean, isn't it important to try to figure out if we should be supporting one side in this race? Are there sides? I guess I'm just kind of struggling to see the implications of all of this.
OK， 我来啊。其实现在呢，这个 AI 的科技手段啊，已经被独裁政府或者政府或者坏的政府在利用，就是用 AI 的技术在管理人民。
So the technology for facial recognition software and technology, it's already being used. Even if it's like a good government, a bad government, it's all already in use.
就是你没有用高科技来维护自己的权利，政府用高科技来监管你、监控你、控制你的钱包、控制你去哪儿，甚至随时可以锁定抓你。
So even though that the government even though that we currently don't have the benefit of using these smart technologies for our benefits, the government uses them all the time to keep track of us, watch what we're doing, and follow our movements so that just in case they have to, they can come and get us.
所以如果我们不能用 AI 的技术让自己强大，那个政府就用 AI 的技术把你们全给控制了。
So there's no point in allowing us to use the technology of the governments that they're already using.
Sorry, which government? Are we talking about the United States government?
We're talking about all the governments.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't we need court orders like domestically for this type of stuff? Like, isn't there a process?
No.
No, I guess not. 你是说美国、中国还是
一样？美国政
all
府
the same.
美国政府
China.
也用高科技来控制你们，
The U.S. government is also using the high tech.
一模一样。美国政府跟中国政府在政府这个方面是一模一样的。
So when you're comparing the U.S. government and the Chinese government,
只不过
there's no difference between them in terms.
只不过美国政府比中国政府玩的还漂亮一点。
It's just that the U.S. is a little bit more stylish about how we do things.
哎，
Professor Sun, wouldn't this be a much harder conversation to have at a university in Beijing? Like,
Could we have this conversation at Beida?
要么我们在北大的话，我们能不能这么讲？
可以
That's all right.
啊，可以，讲完了就被抓走了。
When we're done, we're all going to jail.
OK， 但我在这儿讲，但我在这儿讲，也有很多人不爱听，
But even when I'm talking here to you
很多人不爱听，
in this room,
因
there's
为
a lot of people that don't want to hear it
因为他们不希望每个人都用 AI 的手段让自己强大。
because they don't want the people to have the power to use AI to become better.
我们赶快要用科技让自己强大，对抗政府，要不然你就被政府吃掉，这一模一样。
If we don't take this technology and use it to improve our government now, what's going to happen is they're going to use it, take it, and give us no chance to do it in the
为什么中国政府对脸部识别、对这个识别非常重视？他就用这个来抓他想抓谁抓谁，就是政府他的独裁能力更大。
So why does the Chinese government so need and want this technology? Because they can use it to control and capture whoever they want when it suits.
OK，
My name is Neve. I'm a systems engineer at Cisco and a part-time student in the technology management program here at Columbia. I have two questions. One is, I do agree with like everything that you're saying. I think I think like we don't want to hear it as humans, right? This is something that's very scary for us. But my two questions are, one, how do we get the right people creating this technology and these algorithms to then control and help human society as a whole, right? Because it's going to then come down to fundamental human trust and who we trust to solve these problems. And then two, like, this is absolutely like fascinating. It's been amazing. And I would love to just learn more and find out like the education system to intersect the governance and technology. Like, I forget what your name was, but the gap that's there, right? I think there should be a program that tries to do this, right? I mean, there's so many like great resources here at Columbia, other places. We need to do this. So.
Yeah, also Ronaldo's institute in Rio does a lot of this stuff. It's called ITS, Institute for Technology and Society of Rio de Janeiro. And look at their website because it's very rich. It's really full of a lot of the discussions of a lot of questions you're asking. But again, I'm as a public policy person, a lot of my life has been spent trying to get this kind of dialogue going. So I'm encouraged to hear what you say. It's not easy, but part of the problem again, I keep coming back to it, is people thinking in their narrow silos. A colleague of mine in Moscow was saying to me very recently, and he's in the government, he was saying the problem we have with AI in Russia is that the people in the private sector want to rush as fast as they can in that direction and not think about anything else because they're so excited with its potential. The people in the government want everything to stop right now because they're really scared about how it should be regulated. And the truth is clearly somewhere between those two extremes. Neither side is wrong, but neither side is completely right. So you have to begin to have a new kind of I would call it public policy dialogue and public policy engagement in which this becomes, as it is in this very small setting, a legitimate setting and a legitimate topic for people deciding their own fate. I mean, that's really what we're talking about. But it's very hard.
OK。AI 就是去人化，任何人都不能相信，没有可以相信的人，所以才相信科技。
So your answer is kind of recursive because what AI is doing is it's replacing the function of humanity. So because there's this underlying problem that no one can trust anybody else, so we allow the algorithms or the AI to come up and serve as that intermediary that everybody can trust.
现在 AI 的发展趋势就是去人化，什么人都不信，相信你的大数据，相信你的科技，这才是人类进步，就是不相信任何人。
So the whole the whole development of humanity has allowed us to develop to this point where there is no more trust between people, and so this is no longer a path of development, but more of a need that has arisen, and AI has risen to fill that.
Okay.
The thing is, though, so I see what he's saying. This is like the futuristic, like who knows how many years out.
No.
My question is at the
Wait, he says it's already here.
At the core start, though, of AI and the algorithm, the human is entering in what that algorithm is and how the machine learns, right? My point is, when we start there at the human saying how the machine should learn, who should we trust to do that? How do we trust it, right? That's where I'm trying to start at the very beginning there, not necessarily when the machine becomes complex to the point where it can learn by itself.
But haven't we done that in the past with politics? Haven't we been trusting people in because we can maybe relate to them, and that's why we voted for them? And you can vote them out, yes, you can vote them out, but you also can't control what they do. I mean, there's a lot of corruption in politics.
No, I agree.
So going forward with this type of philosophy that I believe he's saying is that it's just taking that trust and shifting it. And you have to evolve your thinking of what you're going to trust.
Back there.
Okay. I said the same thing.
Okay. You go next. Okay.
So where do you assign?
Tell us who you are.
Oh, Steve Mosca, and I've been selling software for my whole career.
Mm-hmm.
But this is fascinating. But where do you assign responsibility? I mean, do we assume that the algorithm always does the right thing? And what if we have autonomous vehicles and one makes a left turn and gets into an accident? What if you assign weaponry that you build that's autonomous and makes a kill decision, and then it's wrong? So facial recognition was wrong, you killed the wrong person. And it's all a machine. So without humans in the system, where do you assign responsibility? Where is there a judge that says this machine is wrong, that the machines judge themselves? What happens to the whole assignment of responsibility?
Yeah, and this,
What's the government?
yeah, you're right, and this kind of autonomy of technology is something that was faced even before the artificial intelligence age. There's a movie out, a documentary movie that's been nominated for an Oscar, and it's about a Russian guy. He's very elderly. Oh, he died last year. But he, in 1962, was sitting in the command center in Russia and got a message, and he had his finger on the button. And the system said there are 3 incoming ballistic missiles from the US aimed at Russia, and they're coming now. Push the button. And he didn't do it. And he was right, because it was a reflection of the sun on the wings that replicated in the system a missile's engine. So this issue of how can you trust machines, can you trust systems, even goes before artificial intelligence. And I think in the end, I mean, my view would be that algorithms are human constructs. The human agency is involved, and the assemblage and the mobilization of those algorithms is something that human beings control. So we haven't, this is where I guess we disagree, we haven't come very far in needing to create a kind of public global ethics around this, just as we have around nuclear weapons, which is sort of working or not always working, because that's the only way we're going to be able to move forward with such powerful technology.
Okay. No. Just very quickly, I think you raised a point here that I think it's a good one. The 5 items that I mentioned, I think they go directly into this.
Tell us them again.
Explainability, accuracy, fairness. I will not remember.
Auditability, because that's transparency.
Auditability, yes.
The auditability.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. And so blockchain as well.
That's exactly right. So that's important to keep in mind as a policy-making perspective, in my view.
哦，是这样的。其实呢
All right, it's like this.
其实我们还是认知有问题。
So actually,
我
there's
们
still
对
a problem
AI 的
with
认知是
humanity.
有问题的。 AI 它不是一个出来就非常完美的，就是非常没有错误的，不是的。
AI is not going to be perfect from the start.
它的大数据完全在不断的完善中，就它出错，它越出错，它越完善，越完善。
So the AI is perfected the more data is fed into it. So as the algorithms advance and as they make mistakes, they improve.
我们人出了错是不认的 ，AI 出了错，它马上就修改，甚至就不会让它出错，甚至有几道神经网络的在控制它。起码，比如说无人驾驶，它的准确度90%，比如人要100，它90。这个 AI 给你治病，比人治病，它要有60%到50%，它的准确度。
So he's talking about when you have a computer or an AI software that is fed data, and as it makes mistakes in the machine learning process, it takes responsibility for those mistakes, acknowledges where it's wrong, and improves itself in its own code with machine learning and deep learning. Humans are not the case. When humans make mistakes, they don't take responsibility for their actions, or they're not forced to. Now, when you look at something like self-driving cars, or sicknesses, like a self-driving car right now at this point, without being perfected yet, is about 90% as good as a human driver.
Okay.
Like an artificially intelligent physician can correctly diagnose a case 50 to 60% of the time.
其实科技啊，最早就是用来杀人的。
So actually, weapons are the beginning of all technology.
人研究任何的科技都是为来杀人的。
So any technology that humans invented was for the purpose
不是 AI 杀
of
人，
destroying
人要求 AI 的，实际上是人做不到，不是 AI 做不到。
So a peaceful and harmonious society actually is something that
就因为
humans can't
就因为我们
achieve.
2.0的人野蛮
It's not
贪
AI's
婪，所以他
problem.
研究的武器都是杀人的。他的目的不是为你好，是为了杀你的。就美国、全世界高科技都是用来杀人的，根本不是用来帮助你的。
So all the high tech in the world is used for the purpose of destroying people. It's not for protecting people.
我们劣等人凭什么要求 AI 你做不到的东西要求 AI 呢？
So what's the purpose of AI? It's so that
杀人、贪婪、野蛮全是人的事儿，不是 AI 的事儿。
the purpose of AI, we have AI to go about and do all the things that we want it to do. But if you look at these businesses like killing people or corruption or kind of becoming doing all the baseless and needless things that humans do, those are things that people do and not things that AI is built to do.
美国最大的预算不是牛奶，不是营养，是军火。军火商。
So what's the number one commodity or product of the U.S.? It's the number one product of the U.S. It's not yogurt. It's not wheat. It's weapons.
Okay.
Okay. Well, on that ominous note, I think
比较烧脑啊。
and I can't help but thinking we've gotten back to where we started, which is that this discussion is a mixture of utopian and dystopian thinking and visions of the future, and that they're both real. But we could go on. Thank you for your wonderful questions. I see there were a lot more. We'd love to stay around and talk to you. I don't know if there's another class coming in, but thank you for coming. Thank you to our speakers, and we hope to see you again.